So hello to my audience on the screen. On the right, it's a very seasoned politician in Bay Area. His name probably you have already heard before because of a railway station. It's called San Jose Diridon Station. That station is named after him. On the screen left is our previous guest. Her name is Elizabeth Hale Chin, ran for a San Jose City Council member. So today we are here to talk a little about so-called Google West campus. That development may have some impact on the downtown San Jose area, especially for public transportation system. How about Rod? You give us a brief introduction of yourself because I know you have a really, really long resume.
Liam, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on your program. I'm honored to be involved with you, and we'll try to elucidate to your audience some of the transportation programs historically and as they're progressing now. I've been involved in transportation really since I went to college. I worked my way through college as a brakeman and a fireman on the old Southern Pacific Railroad, and then I was 2 combat tours to Vietnam as a naval officer, and came back and went to work for Lockheed for a couple of years, went through their training programs, and then I went to started my own research company doing statistical research across the United States, needs assessment surveys, and then we got into politics, was elected to the Saratoga City Council. A very young and foolish young man at that time, and then elected to the County Board of Supervisors. And of course, in California, the County Board of Supervisors are the most powerful political positions in the state because of the huge areas that we cover and the large populations and the huge budgets. 5 members of the Board of Supervisors control a $20 billion budget, 20,000 employees, and a huge service area. So I had the opportunity of doing that for 20 years, and then term limits were adopted, and I left that responsibility, during which time I chaired the transportation programs the whole time, and chaired 9 different rail construction projects, including the high-speed rail program for the state during that time. And then I went on to become the executive director of a congressional research center, the largest transportation policy research center in the world, and did that for 20 years and have retired now at the ripe old age of 84, and I'm looking forward to trying to leave a better world for my grandchildren.
Right. So, like I said before, the San Jose Diridon Station was named after you when you got retired from Santa Clara County Board. That's correct, right?
That happened in 1994. At the end of my 20 years on the Santa Clara County Transit Board as the chair of the transit agency. I was also the founding chair of the organization that created the Caltrain system, and I chaired the project to identify the location for and rebuild the what is now called the Diridon Station, and we raised $30 million to expand the area around it and to reconstruct the badly broken old station when the earthquake occurred. It's a National Historic Landmark, and I'm very proud to have it bear my name.
Yeah, I've been there before because I actually really took a Amtrak train from San Jose to Seattle. It's quite a difference. We can talk about that later. But that station itself, it looks stunning. I really like it. I think it's should preserve it as it for now, and it has that historical significance, right? So the reason we have this conversation is because of this Google West development. So how about you give us some insight? Because I know you, as a seasoned politician and a public servant, you probably know it's a really big deal to make from is this a private enterprise, and we have this body of government, right? Usually the government should negotiate a deal with this developer or the new owner of the land. So how about you give us an insight about this deal?
Well, I don't know the technical details relating to the Google negotiations. I have advised a couple of times in that process, and I have great respect for what they're doing. They're doing a very delicate job very well by looking at the best in the world and trying to bring those lessons back to what's called downtown West development. The development around the station is on lands that Google has acquired.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone out and carefully negotiated with each one of the landowners to the point where they've acquired a major part of the land holdings around the government lands that are around the station and the station itself. The station, though, is not going to be owned by Google. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to be owned by Caltrain. Maybe there'll be a negotiation with the city of San Jose, but right now it's owned by Caltrain, and it is being master planned for the future by Caltrain and by the High Speed Rail Authority and by the city of San Jose and others too. But that's the primary forces that are master planning the future use. And under consideration, there is what's called a Joint Powers Advisory Board that's looking at that, and they've been studying it for about 20 years and have carefully understand what the future holds. And I'm a member of that group. It's led by the mayor of San Jose or council members from San Jose or members of the board of supervisors. Recent chair has been Sam Liccardo and Cindy Chavez, and they're focused on making sure that it's done right. What they haven't come to any conclusions yet, but the organizations that are working with them that have the authority over the projects have come to some conclusions, and they have decided that the high-speed rail lines will come into the station elevated at about 18 feet above the ground. There'll be a support structure that will extend well south past Willow Glen, and then it will extend north over the BART past the BART station at SAP Center and on up to San Francisco. That elevated structure could be used also by Caltrain. I'm not sure that that's been decided yet, but they could both use the same tracks there. Then there's a big discussion going on as to what's going to occur on top of and around that station. I think everybody agrees that the station itself needs to be protected because it's a National Historic Landmark.
Yeah.
But there's going to be continual pressures to modify it dramatically. The current ideas relating to the station are to protect the facade, but maybe to extend above the station as much as 20 stories, commercial and residential facilities that would be not only above the station, but possibly also above the tracks, to use the air rights over the whole facility to increase the amount of residential and commercial opportunities in the area. Of course, that would translate into higher ridership and higher tax return for the city of San Jose and for the a long-term leasehold for the Caltrain system. So that's a very advantageous thing to do. And I have to be careful not to be an advocate in this because I'm obviously biased. And so I look at examples of how stations are handled in China and Japan especially, which are the more advanced countries on this subject. Japan has 50-story buildings on top of their high-speed rail stations. commercial, residential, even big shopping centers right on top of the stations, using that air right area to increase their commercial and residential opportunities. And that's something that we ought to look at. Maybe not 50 stories, of course, because you're in the flight path there, but they do allow 20, 25 stories in that location. So there's no reason in the world why higher density on top of the station, saving the facade and the beautiful ceiling inside and so on, couldn't be developed in that whole area. Remember that a high-speed train station has to be a half a mile, a quarter of a mile long, because the trains are long. Yeah. And so we're going to have a very, very long structure there. And there's no reason in the world why the air rights over that whole thing couldn't be developed into additional commercial and industrial or commercial and residential opportunities.
We discussed this quite a bit as a resident of downtown San Jose. This used to be, Liam just mentioned, I used to run for D3, and the Diridon station used to be part of D3. So it was very much kind of part of our discussion, and then it became part of District 6. So there, that whole area is going to change. And from the residents' point of view, I think, Rod, as you said, we do see the benefits. I mean, San Jose has been a bedroom community that has decreased compared with other cities. We have a kind of smaller tax base because we're residential only. So we do see the coming of Google as a very positive thing. And Google has been working on this very steadily. Like Rod just mentioned, this is all private ownership because they started buying, I think it's about 6 years ago. They've steadily bought up. And this is before this whole thing kind of really came to public attention. When the plan was announced, the city council held meetings for several years. And surprisingly, though, while we see the beautiful picture of what is commercial airspace and ground space and renovation and restoration of an old station could do for us, there's quite a bit of concerns. And all the Google hearings that the city hall was holding had protest after protest. And the fear is what they did in Mountain View. We saw that while Google has kind of this plot of land to build their headquarters, we were afraid that a lot of surrounding residents will be displaced. So I think that has been kind of taken off the table because Google pledged a very large number of community stabilization fund. I think it's in the $200 million range. I can't remember exactly. But now there's also a new issue that just came up that Google is now putting the plan on hold. We have always known it's going to be a 10-year project. It's time so Google's launch will coincide with either coming of the BART or the launch of the high-speed rail from Central Valley to Diridon Station. But now, kind of because the pandemic, I guess Google is rethinking its real estate plan. We don't know what's going to happen. I guess ultimately it's really dependent on Google's employees. Are they going to continue to work in offices? Would they like to commute from somewhere near San Jose? If San Jose becomes the center of most of their employees, whether by relocation or by local hires, and I think Google will proceed with the plan. But the whole thing is a little bit up in there right now. And we also have a concern about this downtown west, is that where does that put downtown east, the traditional part of downtown that's closer to the city hall? So these are concerns from the residents area.
It certainly opens such a big amount of questions. Even just what Mr. Diridon just said, I already have many questions. First of all, is that already a done deal? Like you said, this elevated 18 feet above head railway, who made the decision, especially overhead of the Willow Glen? How long it will take for that happen? I mean, look at the high-speed railway in Central Valley, right? People talk about that for like decades. You barely make any progress.
Actually, that's not true at all.
No?
The Central Valley project is almost done. When was the last time you were over there?
The high-speed railway to LA, right?
The high-speed rail system in the Central Valley from Merced to Bakersfield, that 171-mile system is about 2/3 done.
Mm.
And and lacks, maybe $6 billion to have it completed. And that's on a total of a $30 billion project. So it's nearly done. Then, of course, the first extension off that project will be from Chowchilla, which is just south of Merced, under the Pacheco Pass to Gilroy, into the Caltrain system, and then servicing Gilroy, San Jose, and San Francisco. So that's in process now. The funding is being negotiated from the federal government in grants, but the environmental clearances are done, and the planning is done, and they're beginning engineering studies. So it's to say that it's taken a long time. It sure has taken a long time, aggravatingly long time, and it's cost a lot more money because of inflation. But it is moving ahead now, primarily because of Governors Brown and Newsom, and the great work of Brian Kelly, the new general manager of the high-speed rail system. And we just had a conversation prior to this call on that subject. There is no final decision on the kind of structures that are going to occur on the station or around the station. That's still under study. And what I said very carefully was that that's one concept under consideration when I began my conversation on that subject. So it's one concept under consideration. Another concept is to tear the station down and start from scratch. That, of course, is opposed by many, many people. So I don't think it's going to occur. It would also be illegal with the National Historic Landmark. I don't know what's going to happen with the station. It hasn't been decided. But whatever happens with the station won't be controlled by Google. It'll be controlled by the Caltrain system and by the city of San Jose and by the High-Speed Rail Authority. And that study is being done under the auspices of the Joint Powers Advisory Board, the San Jose Diridon Station Joint Powers Advisory Board, which meets quarterly and talks about policy opportunities. Input is going into that from the city of San Jose's group and the VTA group that are studying the subject. And those meetings are all public. They've been highly publicized, and there's a full auditorium each time the meetings occur. So people do understand what's going on there. People that are interested and have been following it do understand. Now I should really dwell on something here. When you talk about the Google project, that is not the station area. That is not the area of the Diridon station, the tracks, or the parking directly adjacent to it. Those are owned by Caltrain, and those will be the development of those areas will be done in compatibility with the Google project, and hopefully augmenting the Google project. But it'll be a governmental project associated primarily with when the elevated structure is built to accommodate the high-speed rail train, probably 10, 15 years from now. And tentatively, the environmental clearance has occurred for an elevated structure through that area. And they looked at an underground structure, an on-grade structure, and an elevated structure. And all of the study data came out finally suggesting that the elevated structure had the most advantages and the least disadvantages.
I think people often confuse Google with Diridon Station because Google has made it its centerpiece that their move to San Jose is really a transportation play, and they're trying to contribute to the environment. And Diridon Station area, because of BART, because Caltrain, because high-speed rail. So I think there's that association, even though, like you just pointed out, they're actually different parcels.
Well, I should stress something here. It was designed by a study begun in 1982 and concluded in 1991 or 2, and implemented by 94, that the station would become the interchange point for the Bay Area. You're going to have serving that station in the future. Most of it's done now. You're going to have BART, Caltrain, the Altamont Express, the Capital trains from Sacramento, the Amtrak trains, the light rail, which is there now. There's a tunnel going right under the station, an interchange station right there for the light rail system, and something like 9 different bus lines interchange there. That's all there right now, and it'll be expanded in the future. And so it'll be the busiest station on the West Coast. Maybe LA Union Station will rival it, but it'll be the busiest station on the West Coast. And the way to maintain the functionality of that system is to make sure that the primary people using it will be coming to the station on mass transportation. So that, if everybody drove their cars to that station, you'd never be able to get near the station because of the cars and parking. So as with everything we're doing in our county, which is going to become the Manhattan of the West, whether we like it or not, then we need to make sure that people can get to where they're going on mass transportation, because they will not be able to get to where they're going on cars in the future or buses. Anything that uses a highway system is going to be gummed up in serious traffic 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we need to be able to create the alternative in that period of time in order to survive economically.
I have some different thought. Maybe I'm a little uneducated on this issue, because you basically did this job for your whole life, right? You know much better than us, and I think you are equipped with a lot of knowledge and probably a vision, because you see a lot of changes in this valley, and you probably will foresee what's going to happen in this valley. But as an immigrant, first of all, I do believe there's a lot of immigrants, when they move here, they actually like the suburban single-family housing and the spacious lifestyle. They love driving to their work, right? But in a sudden, if the future or the vision for them in the future in this valley will be Tokyo-like, or like you said, Manhattan in the West, I'm not sure many of those people would like to see that happen. Maybe it doesn't matter, but like you said, it eventually will happen.
That will happen if we're skillful. That will happen, but only on specific locations. We can infill at very high densities on top of the rail stations and look like Toronto. Toronto has been chosen the most livable community in the world and has the best transit agency in the world. And the reason is because their rail systems, and they have a couple of different primary rail systems, one like BART and one like light rail. On top of the rail stations, they build high-rise construction, residential, commercial, mixed use, and so on top of the rail stations, so that you don't have a bunch of rail tracks and a station sitting there, but you have the structures of 10, 20, 30 stories on top of the rail stations, so that people can not have to own a car. They can take an elevator from where they live to the rail station and take the rail line then to the downtown symphony or the Toronto sports events or so on, all of which are on the rail lines, and all of which are on high-rise structures. The general area of Toronto, though, is a single-story community, like you're describing people love here in Silicon Valley. And that's the way we can accommodate the expansion of our commerce, as you would see in Manhattan, without having the whole area become like Manhattan, just on top of the rail stations. And the rail stations are going to be not accessible and not desirable for the average population anyway. And you can have a buffer around those rail stations and parking of trees and parks and so on top of a podium of grass over the stations. If we do it skillfully, if we do it like Toronto, if we do it like Tokyo, and protect the protect single family character of the overall population, but have a heavy infill on top of and around the rail stations so that we can accommodate the growth that's going to be demanded by our commerce. Silicon Valley is going to grow. Either they're going to grow or they're going to leave. If they leave, you're not going to want to live here because it's going to be like Detroit, depressed area.
If those big companies leave, this area will become those, maybe now it's like a booming town and it can be a ghost town. Is that possible? No?
Detroit, look at Detroit. Detroit became a ghost town with weeds growing in everybody's yards, nobody wanting to live there anymore because there were no jobs there anymore. If Silicon Valley can't get people to work, then they can't continue to be here, and you'll see the major employers, the big employers, not these little groups like the headquarters building for Elon Musk's going down to Houston so he can avoid his taxes. But you'll see the big companies moving their headquarters away. When that happens, we'll go into a serious depression. We don't want that to happen. And the way to avoid that happening is to accommodate the growth here in the valley on mass transportation. And we do that with called transit-oriented developments on top of and around the train stations.
California is different from Michigan and Detroit. Number one is our weather. Number two is I do think we have this innovation-based culture, which has been in existence for decades. I know there are a number of cities who claim to be Silicon Valley elsewhere in the United States and in the world. But although I think our ecosystem is going to be hard to duplicate, this tolerance for failure, this incredible amount of resources and funding for startups. So I'm a little bit hopeful that we're not going to become the next Detroit. But I'm totally for the transit-oriented development. I know BART is already talking about it for their downtown station. They already have kind of pictures rendering what it's going to look like. There's going to be residential tower intermixing there, and below will be the commercial parts of the whole plan. So, and I think it's not just immigrants who like that suburban lifestyle. There are a lot of residents who are really resistant to high density living. And usually as a downtown resident, we say, just shift them to downtown. We chosen to live downtown because we like high density. So maybe we'll be able to kind of accommodate the whole spectrum of desires, from the high density downtown urban environment and to the more suburban. And by the way, Toronto is still a very hot destination for immigrants, despite its kind of high density and a sprawling downtown area, much bigger than our downtown, but it's still very desirable to immigrants.
Yeah, I think that's it's always big city or metropolitan area always have this economical attractive quality to the immigrants, right? But for the residents,
as long as you can find a job.
Yeah, but for the residents, it's like they want to keep their lifestyle. Then they're gonna fight back. They will always fight back, and then you have to solve the problem politically.
Let me correct you something. We've got to not conflate this information. High density that serves transit does not create high density for the average citizen. High density that supports transit in transit-oriented developments and high-rises protects the average citizen by creating the density that serves the metropolitan area over the transit systems.
Yeah, so you basically separate the problem, right? So like we can serve certain people like who want to better commute condition, and also keep the old lifestyle, like you can have your single family housing away from that thing, right?
It's going to be very expensive in the future because they're going to become very rare, as you see now. But if you can afford it, you're going to have the opportunity to have a single family home in our valley for the next 100 years.